Immigration has been a constant theme throughout the presidency of Donald Trump. What are your views on immigration when it comes to open borders versus closed borders, citizenship, public and private property as it relates to this issue, and any immigration procedures that would be a part of your platform?
So I 100% agree with the Libertarian Party platform of open borders. In fact, I'd like to point out that I agree with the platform on every plank. And as the candidate, I would put forth every plank in the platform. So with immigration, whenever we have immigrants come into our country, it energizes the economy. Now, there are many libertarians even who agree with Milton Friedman, who said, well, you can either have open borders or you can have a welfare state, but you can't have both. And since we have a welfare state, you cannot have open borders. Actually, that's not what the statistics show. If you look at the empirical evidence, if you look at the dollars that come in, that is just plain wrong. And besides, what a lot of people don't realize is that we already have a little bit of a stopgap there, because programs such as TANF and SNAP and Medicaid often have a 5-year waiting period. So you don't have that problem. Also, statistics have shown that the overall net effect is positive, that with each new immigrant, we get about $260,000 added to the economy. And another concern of people is crime. And it turns out that people who are born in another country and move here actually have an incarceration rate that's about 1/3 lower than people who are born in this country. So this encourages people we want in our country, people who are independent, self-reliant, who grow our country strong and competitive. And it gives our country a diversity that our country can appreciate, that Americans just can get a pure joy of learning about other cultures and coming face to face and working with people from other countries. And I'd like to also point out that I'm actually the grandchild of immigrants. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on for the immigration questions, it's going to be Dan Berman next, 2 minutes.
So I think everyone's going to say the same thing. So I'm going to go a little bit off the wire with this one. I want to point out some things. A lot of people think illegal immigrants are going to come here and go there and take advantage of our tax system. They're going to send their kids to American schools, which Americans are paying tax for. Well, American schools are paid for with property tax, and those, whether they're legal or not, immigrants are living somewhere. If they're renting, they're paying property tax. They're paying their landlord's property tax. If they buy a house, they're paying property tax. They're also helping to increase the market value of homes, because the more occupancy you have, the higher the value. That's a pretty big contribution. They're not stealing from that. There are all these other objections. And what I want to challenge anyone who has an objection to any type of migration at any point. And by the way, I want to say this, I've been down here for most of the last couple of years and I haven't seen a single rapist or murderer, just throwing that out there. But I want to challenge you to think like this. Take any reason that you're afraid of an immigrant coming from Mexico or China or anywhere else, and apply that to somebody from the state next to your state, because it's another geography. People could go from one state to your state and take your jobs. They could go from one state where they've been paying taxes, and now in your tax, they can take advantage of programs that are in your state. All of these programs are very real, but the immigration is not the problem. These programs are the problem, and that's where we need to be looking. Why do we have these programs in the first place? Why do we depend on them? And I'm going to go back to the American dream, the new American dream, where we really shouldn't. We should have sustainable lives where we don't depend on government or any of its social safety net programs. We should be our own safety nets.
Thank you, Mr. Berman. Mr. Supreme, your response to the immigration issues.
Yes, I would like to once again take the opportunity to read the relevant platform plank from the Libertarian Party platform, because that says a lot right there. Free trade in migration. We support the removal of governmental impediments to free trade. Political freedom and escape from tyranny demand that individuals not be unreasonably constrained by government in the crossing of political boundaries. Economic freedom demands the unrestricted movement of human as well as financial capital across national borders. And I believe that that is very true. And I agree with it 100%, and would certainly be amenable to any reasonable implementation plans that we all came up with. Thank you very much. Immigrants make America great.
Thank you, Mr. Supreme. Mr. Kokesh, your views on immigration.
I think by accepting the existing duopoly framing on this issue, we are really doing ourselves a disservice and failing to highlight libertarian principles. The question shouldn't be open or closed borders, but what's a legitimate border in the first place? Is a government border a legitimate border, or is a private property border a legitimate border? I would say only private property borders are legitimate. The government doesn't have a right to put up a line on a map and say people from this area can't cross into this area. I own 10 acres here in Arizona. Why can't I invite people from anywhere in the world to come here? Who has a right to put up any kind of block to them being able to go where I'm inviting them on my own property? I need to be able to set that standard if my property rights are being respected. If not, then they're not. And if we're not embracing this framing that rejects the duopoly messaging on this, we're missing that opportunity. And what we're doing is advocating for some kind of reform. You know, every other candidate here who's running to be president, to keep the federal government going, is saying that we're going to reform it in some way, that the paradigm of we need this big central authority, we're going to maintain it. We're not going to give you a new paradigm of decentralization or freedom or localization. We're going to keep the centralized, authoritative, you need a president, you need a government to protect you, whether it's from state governments or from poverty or medical bills. And they're all trying to make this paradigm of centralized authoritative control of the federal government work. This is the only platform, localization, that says, you know, we don't need this anymore. We can have a whole new way of thinking about this system.
Thank you, Mr. Kokesh. Mr. Hornberger.
I grew up on a farm on the Rio Grande. We hired illegal immigrants on there. And I've experienced the police state that comes with this dysfunctional system firsthand. I've seen the Border Patrol come into our farm without warrants, bust our workers. It was a very horrible day in our life. These guys were our buddies too. I was in high school. And then you've got the police state with checkpoints and roving patrol, Border Patrol checkpoints. I've been stopped by them. Open your trunk. We're looking for illegal immigrants. It is a total police state in the American Southwest. You've got trespasses, boarding of Greyhound buses, you've got Berlin fences, Berlin walls, but most important, you've got death and suffering. Go Google man, 3-year-old daughter, Mexico, Rio Grande, and you'll see that photograph of a man with his 3-year-old daughter dead on the shores of the Rio Grande. One of the proudest things that this party has ever done is take the position in favor of open borders. You hear sometimes that Democrats favor open borders. That's nonsense. They favor this socialist system, and that's what it is, a socialist central planning system as much as Democrats do. And I want to read, Vermin read the party platform today. I want y'all to hear what I read in 1990 when I joined the platform committee of the Libertarian Party. We therefore call for the elimination of all restrictions on immigration, the abolition of the Immigration and Naturalization Service and the Border Patrol, and a full declaration of full amnesty for all people who have entered the country illegally. This is one of the proudest positions this party has ever taken. We are standing for the defenseless, those that cannot stand up against the tyranny of the Immigration Service. The best thing that this country could ever do for harmonizing the American people with the people of the world is open borders, free trade, and open immigration, a free market approach to the movement of people, goods, and services across borders. It's the only position that is consistent with religious principles as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hornberger. Judge Jim Gray, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. We must normalize this. The first thing I must say is that closing down our borders is simply wrong, not right. It's not American. Number two, we have people around the world that would like our forefathers, come here to pursue the American dream, and bless them. We are a nation of immigrants, and immigration has made us great. But I would actually issue work visas to them pretty generally, pretty easily, maybe with background checks with regard to criminal justice issues, mental health, even terrorists, if you would. But then they could come here, they'd be normalized, they could live normal lives, they could go back and forth across the border as they desired, they could have a driver's license, get insurance, etc., not be taken advantage by the system. But no welfare would be attached to that. In addition, we need to stop. Let's focus on this one for a minute. We need to stop creating causes why people are fleeing from their own homes to come here as refugees. Simply do away with the war on drugs, which has wreaked havoc all around the world, Latin America, Afghanistan, wherever. Stop those. Stop sending our troops all in foreign wars that create these refugees. It's all part of it. They're fleeing from the violence that our policies have caused. We need to recognize that. And finally, we need to have a reasonable path towards citizenship. Look, it's so cumbersome, it takes so long, it's rooted with real problems. I'm proud to say that I adopted a son from Vietnam when I was there in the Navy and brought him here, and we were able to naturalize him and get him his citizenship pretty quickly. Maybe I got preference because I was a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office at that time, but we need to normalize this. We are a nation of immigrants. Let's bring them under the law, and then we will all treat each other as brothers that we are.